I'm now 74, but there really has not ever been a day that I haven't thought about him. At least once, maybe twice, or 3 times, or 4 times, or 5 times through the day.
Under the dim glow of an old training hall, Bolo Yeung finally broke the silence he had carried for decades. An unspoken truth tied to the most mysterious death in martial arts history. As his voice trembled with memories of Bruce Lee's final days, the room seemed to freeze, as if time itself leaned in to listen. This wasn't gossip, nor the recycled theories fans debated for years. It was a first-hand revelation, raw, unsettling, and impossible to ignore. But what exactly did Bolo reveal that changes everything we thought we knew, beneath the power and the legend? Long before Bolo Yeung's stunning revelation sent shockwaves through the martial arts world, there was a quieter, far more human story unfolding behind the lights, noise, and myth of Bruce Lee's rising fame. Their friendship did not begin with mystery or controversy. It started with respect, forged in a place where words mattered less than movement, discipline, and the honesty of physical truth. Bruce Lee was not merely a martial artist. He was a force of nature. His speed, precision, and philosophical depth made him stand out in an industry obsessed with spectacle. He blended motion and meaning in a way no one had seen before, transforming combat into something almost poetic. But even a phenomenon needs the right counterpart, someone strong enough to challenge it and grounded enough to understand the weight it carries. That counterpart was Bolo Yeung, born Yangtze, a man of immense power, sculpted by years of bodybuilding, disciplined training, and a profound respect for traditional martial arts. Long before he stepped in front of a camera, he was already a champion. People often saw only the intimidating stare or the villainous glare crafted for film, but behind it was a thoughtful practitioner who trained with a level of discipline that matched his size. Their destinies collided on the Hong Kong set of Enter the Dragon, the film that would seal Bruce's place in global history. Yet what formed between them during those intense, sweat-filled sessions was deeper than a professional partnership. Bruce saw beyond Bolo's towering frame. He recognized a fighter who understood the deeper rhythm of martial arts, the dance between power and restraint, the harmony between force and finesse. Behind the scenes, their training sessions became the stuff of whispered legend. Bolo often spoke of Bruce's speed, admitting it was unlike anything he had ever encountered. But what struck him even more was Bruce's unstoppable work ethic. While others on set came for fame or fortune, Bruce worked like a man chasing something bigger, something invisible. He trained between takes, after hours, and before sunrise, constantly refining, evolving. The two sparred and pushed one another. Bruce with his blinding agility, Bolo with his overwhelming strength. They were opposites in many ways, yet somehow perfectly balanced. Bruce even personally requested Bolo's presence in the film because he knew that Bolo's raw physical intensity would elevate the entire production. Their on-screen clash never made the final cut, but the energy between them was unforgettable, a rare melding of power and purpose. And as their bond grew, Bolo started to notice something few people ever did. Bruce, despite his brilliance and staggering physical gifts, carried a weight, an invisible pressure that seemed to tighten around him with each passing day. It wasn't dramatic or obvious. It lived in the way Bruce pushed himself harder than necessary, the way his focus sharpened almost painfully, the way he seemed to be racing against a clock no one else could hear. This subtle shift, this heaviness behind the legend, would later become the quiet thread in Bolo Yeung's long-kept silence, a thread that now hangs at the center of his shocking revelation. And what hidden burden haunted Bruce Lee beyond the spotlight? A secret even Bolo Yeung only now dares to reveal. What really consumed him? Stay tuned. The weight he could never share. From the outside, the world saw Bolo Yeung as the immovable force, the giant on screen, the warrior built from iron discipline and years of unbroken training. But inside, he carried something far heavier than muscle. Decades of unspoken truth about the friend he respected more deeply than he ever admitted. And now, as his long-awaited revelation unfolds, it connects seamlessly to the quiet burden he had watched Bruce Lee carry in life, a burden the world never fully understood. For years, Bolo remained silent about Bruce's death. He listened as people everywhere argued, invented stories, and chased their own versions of the truth. Poisoning, hidden enemies, secret assassinations, curses whispered in back rooms. Each rumor is more dramatic than the last. But Bolo avoided those conversations completely. He kept his thoughts locked away, not because he feared backlash, but because he sensed that what he had witnessed, the real story, was something the world wasn't ready to confront. From a distance, it was clear to anyone who truly knew him that Bolo's silence wasn't emptiness. It was restraint. It was grief. It was a form of loyalty to a friend whose life had always moved too fast, burned too bright, and demanded more from him than anyone realized. And this inner loyalty shaped the perspective he finally shared, one that cut through every conspiracy theory with painful clarity. When he finally broke his silence, he didn't talk about assassins or hidden plots. He didn't feed the flames of sensational rumors. Instead, he revealed something far quieter and far more devastating. He explained that Bruce Lee, without intention or cruelty, had emotionally shattered Betty Ting Pay. Not through violence, not through betrayal, but simply by allowing her to witness his world. The pressure, the exhaustion, the weight he never let the public see. In Bolo's view, Bruce didn't kill her in a literal sense, but he left her with a wound that would follow her for the rest of her life. From Yeung, the real tragedy wasn't the global headlines about how Bruce died. It was the private damage, the emotional debris scattered across the lives of those closest to him. Betty, forever linked to his final hours, carried that sorrow everywhere she went. The world judged her, questioned her, blamed her, but never understood the heaviness she lived with. And Bolo, who had watched Bruce push himself beyond the limits of any normal man, saw something the world ignored: the cost of greatness. To him, Bruce's internal struggles were the fiercest battles he ever fought. They weren't caught on camera or written into movie scripts. They lived in the tension of his muscles, the tightening of his jaw, the restless way he trained as if he were racing against time itself. That unseen fight, his battle within, was the part no fan celebrated, the part no rumor captured. And so when Bolo finally revealed the truth, it wasn't meant to shock the world with scandal. It was meant to remind them that behind the legend was a human being whose brilliance left emotional scars on the people who loved him most. In Bolo's eyes, that was the real mystery, the real tragedy, and the real weight of Bruce Lee's legacy, one that no theory could explain. But what if Bruce Lee's greatest battles were never fought on screen? Could the hidden struggles no one saw define his true legacy? Keep watching. The day strength finally fell silent. For Bolo Yeung, the moment he heard the news on July 20th, 1973, felt like a fracture in reality. Bruce Lee, his training partner, his rival in strength, his equal in discipline, was suddenly gone. The world reacted with disbelief, but for Bolo, the shock carried a deeper sting. He had witnessed Bruce's power with his own eyes. He had felt the force of his strikes, watched the precision of his movements, and seen the fierce determination that made Bruce seem almost untouchable. For a man like that to simply vanish felt impossible. It felt wrong in a way that words could not explain. He remembered the long hours they spent in the gym, sweat pouring, their breaths sharp with effort. Bruce trained like a man chasing a storm. He pushed himself harder than anyone Bolo had ever known. Even when the camera crews went home, Bruce kept going, stretching, striking, experimenting, refining. He treated martial arts like a language only he could hear, and he was determined to master every syllable. To Bolo, the idea that such a relentless force could suddenly stop breathing made no sense. It defied everything he believed about strength, resilience, and the human will. But in the quiet days after Bruce's death, Bolo found himself revisiting memories with a new kind of clarity. The world was shouting theories, poisoning, secret assassinations, even curses whispered by those hungry for drama. But Bolo knew none of that fit the man he had known. Bruce lived in reality, not in legends or ghost stories, and the truth, Bolo realized, was often quieter and far more painful than the world wanted to accept. It was clear that Bolo's understanding did not come from conspiracy. It came from observation, small moments that at the time had seemed insignificant. The subtle sigh Bruce would let out after an intense training session, the way he rubbed his temples when he thought no one was watching, the occasional tremble in his hands that he disguised as stretching, the weight loss he waved off with a grin. Bruce was fighting more than opponents. He was fighting the pressure of fame, the expectations of the world, and the unforgiving standards he placed upon himself. And as Bolo allowed these memories to settle, a deeper realization took shape. Bruce's greatest battles were not on the screen or in the gym. They were inside him. The pressure to be perfect. The responsibility of representing Asian martial arts to a world that often refused to understand him. The constant drive to push boundaries, innovate, transform, and outdo not just others, but himself. Those battles demanded a price no one fully saw. Looking back, Bolo saw the signs with painful clarity, the headaches, the fatigue, the hollow look in Bruce's eyes at the end of a long day, the way his energy sometimes dipped suddenly, only to be forced back up by sheer will. Bruce had been exhausted, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. He had been burning at a pace nobody could sustain. And here, a new and unexpected perspective settled into Bolo's thoughts, one that had not fully taken form until years later. He realized Bruce had been carrying something far heavier than fame or perfectionism. He had been carrying the fear of time itself. Bruce lived like a man who believed he didn't have long, even if he never said it aloud. His urgency, his restlessness, his need to achieve everything, now Bolo saw it differently in hindsight. It wasn't ambition alone. It was a race, one Bruce seemed to feel deep inside his bones. And in the end, it was his body, not his will, that finally yielded. But could Bruce Lee's unstoppable drive have been fueled not by ambition, but by a secret fear racing against time itself? What do you think truly pushed him? Stay glued. The day the warrior laid down his armor. For Bolo Yeung, the story of July 20th, 1973, never arrived as a headline or a rumor. It lived in the quiet grief he carried, the grief of someone who had seen the signs long before the world learned the truth. From his perspective, that final day in Bruce Lee's life was not a mystery wrapped in conspiracy, but a tragic, inevitable collision between human limits and a spirit that refused to recognize them. That morning was supposed to be routine, another intense chapter in Bruce's speeding life. He had meetings scheduled, including more dubbing work for Enter the Dragon, the film already shaping his worldwide legacy. He was also pouring himself into Game of Death, the project he both loved and obsessed over, its ideas, its choreography, its message. But behind the energy and ambition, Bolo had noticed something the world had overlooked. Bruce had been complaining of headaches for weeks. His weight had dropped so drastically that even his clothes fit differently. He moved with the same sharpness, but there was a hollowness to him, a tightening around the eyes, a quick but quiet wince in the middle of a conversation. Signs Bruce brushed off with the kind of smile that tried to hide truth rather than celebrate it. Doctors had warned him. Friends had asked him to rest. His own body had tried to slow him down, yet he pushed through every barrier as if backing off for even one day meant losing everything he had fought to build. That was the side only people like Bolo understood, the side where greatness was not a blessing, but a relentless taskmaster. After meeting with producer Raymond Chow that afternoon, Bruce went to Betty Ting Pay's apartment to discuss script ideas. It should have been a simple meeting, nothing extraordinary. But Bruce arrived already drained, mentioning another headache, sharp, persistent, the kind he had been dismissing for far too long. Betty, concerned and wanting to help, gave him a painkiller. Bruce decided to lie down for a moment, expecting to rest only briefly before moving on with the day. When hours passed and he didn't wake, the world around him shifted into panic. Betty's shock, the rushed attempts to revive him, the disbelief that followed, none of it seemed real. And yet, by evening, the impossible had happened. Bruce Lee, at just 32 years old, was gone. The official cause was cerebral edema, an unexpected swelling of the brain, likely triggered by a reaction to the medication he had taken. A medical explanation, clear and clinical. But for Bolo, standing outside the storm of rumors, it felt heavier than science. Not because of conspiracies, those came quickly, wild and sensational, from people desperate to believe Bruce had been struck down by enemies, by poison, by supernatural forces. Theories that made for dramatic stories, but ignored the truth he had witnessed firsthand. Bolo knew the real tragedy was simpler, more human, and far more painful. Bruce had driven himself beyond the point where the body could keep up. He had carried not only his dreams but the expectations of millions, the weight of cultural representation, the pressure to break barriers, prove himself, transform an industry, and never slow down. That pressure had been tightening around him long before July 20th. And here, in Bolo's reflection, a quiet twist emerged, one he had only understood years later. Bruce died at Betty's apartment, but in a deeper sense, he died long before that moment. He died in the countless days he ignored his pain, in the nights he pushed through exhaustion, in the silence where he hid the toll of his ambition. To the world, Bruce Lee's final day was a mystery. To Bolo Yeung, it was the consequence of a battle Bruce had been fighting long before anyone realized he was at war with himself. But what do you think drove the man Bruce Lee to his final day? His unmatched genius, hidden struggles, or a battle no one else could see? Stay with us. The man behind the legend. Bruce Lee was more than the unstoppable figure the world worshipped. To millions, he was an icon, a whirlwind of speed, precision, and philosophy, reshaping martial arts and breaking barriers on the global stage. His name carried power, his image radiated invincibility, and his presence inspired awe. But Bolo knew the truth beneath the lightning-fast kicks and electrifying punches. Behind the public persona, Bruce was a man carrying burdens no audience could ever see. He was husband, father, and visionary, roles that weighed as heavily as his on-screen fights. Bruce met Linda Lee Caldwell when she was still a student at his Seattle martial arts school. Their connection was immediate, the kind that seemed to bridge the gap between two worlds. By 1964, they were married. Together, they built a family, welcoming two children, Brandon and Shannon, while navigating the relentless pace of Bruce's rising fame. From the outside, it looked like the perfect life. A brilliant, devoted father and a trailblazing star whose films, The Big Boss and Fist of Fury, were turning him into a global phenomenon. But Bolo, who had trained and sparred alongside him, saw the cracks forming behind the smiles and accolades. Bruce's devotion to martial arts was absolute. To him, it wasn't just sport or performance, it was a mission. He wanted to reshape Hollywood's perception of Asians, to challenge stereotypes and elevate his craft to an art form. That mission consumed him, leaving little space for the quieter rhythms of family life. Bolo observed Bruce working tirelessly, long after most men would have called it a day. He wrote, researched, trained, and refined techniques, pushing his body beyond its limits with a discipline that seemed superhuman. Yet even Bruce's body, sculpted and perfected through years of relentless training, began to show the strain. His weight fluctuated, his energy ebbed, and the persistent headaches he stubbornly ignored were signs that the machine he had built himself into was faltering. The emotional strain was no less intense. Rumors circulated about Bruce's relationship with Ting Pay, a rising star in Hong Kong cinema. While many dismissed it as friendship, those closest, Bolo included, sensed the emotional complexity beneath the surface. It was a tension that hovered between Bruce's public brilliance and private vulnerability, a tension that Linda felt acutely. She watched silently as the man she loved pushed himself to the brink, aware that the pressures of fame, family, and personal ambitions were beginning to erode the foundation of their life together. Bolo remembered how Bruce would sometimes sit quietly after training, a rare moment when his mind seemed far away, weighed down by thoughts only he could carry. On the surface, he was invincible, untouchable. But Bolo could see the cracks, the exhaustion, the fleeting moments of frustration, the subtle shifts in energy that hinted at a man silently fighting battles no one else could see. Every strike, every kick, every calculated movement on screen was the product of a mind and body under immense pressure. And Bolo realized that Bruce's true challenge was not the opponents he faced in films or competitions, but the invisible wars within himself. And here, a subtle revelation came to Bolo, one that changed how he understood Bruce's final days. The brilliance and the burden were inseparable. Bruce's extraordinary talent was inseparable from the relentless pressure it demanded. Every public triumph, every record-breaking performance was paid for in private, with exhaustion, emotional strain, and moments of profound vulnerability. Bolo understood then that the man the world adored was also a man racing against unseen forces, against expectation, against time, against the fragility of human limits, a truth far more poignant than any legend could capture. But could Ting Pay have truly understood the hidden burdens Bruce carried? Or was she unknowingly witnessing a genius pushed beyond human limits. The quiet witness. Understanding Bruce Lee meant seeing the man behind the legend, the man few ever truly glimpsed. And in those final years, one person saw him in a way that others couldn't. Betty Ting Pay. Her name had always lingered quietly in the background of Bruce's story, wrapped in rumor, speculation, and curiosity. Yet for Bolo, the truth about Betty was far simpler and far more poignant than the world imagined. She wasn't just a passing figure or a headline. She was one of the rare people who glimpsed the private burdens Bruce carried, the weight of fame and expectation that pressed upon him every day. Betty was an actress in her own right, building her career in Hong Kong's competitive film industry. She wasn't drawn to Bruce merely for his fame, his power, or his magnetism, though those were undeniable. She had ambition, drive, and a determination to succeed, just like him. Yet there was something about Bruce's presence, his energy, the intensity that he carried even in the quietest moments, that drew her in. Bolo often observed the subtle ways she seemed to calm him, providing a space where Bruce could be more than a public figure, more than a martial arts prodigy. In her apartment, away from cameras and flashing lights, Bruce could drop the armor of perfection he carried everywhere else. For Bruce, life rarely allowed for pauses. He was a man in constant motion, fighting opponents both on screen and inside his own mind. He had a relentless drive, a compulsion to perfect every strike, every movement, every word he spoke. Bolo had seen it firsthand, the intensity, the tireless energy, the way Bruce pushed beyond limits no one else could endure. Yet with Betty, he found something different, a refuge. She offered a quiet presence that allowed him to recharge, to breathe without judgment, to momentarily escape the crushing demands of stardom. Their relationship, however, was never fully understood by the outside world. Some insisted they were simply friends. Others whispered of a romance. Bolo, who observed Bruce closely, never focused on labels. What mattered was the role Betty played. She offered Bruce a rare, unguarded space where he could be human. And that, Bolo realized later, was no small gift. It was the kind of support that allowed a man constantly under pressure to carry on another day. But when Bruce died, Betty's role shifted in ways the public could never comprehend. She became more than a friend. She became the last witness to the final, unrelenting weight that had pressed upon him. The quiet space she offered could not shield him from the physical and emotional toll that had built over years of pushing himself past all limits. Bolo knew this. He had seen the signs, the exhaustion, the fleeting moments of strain that Bruce had hidden from everyone else. Betty's presence that day was both a comfort and a silent testament to the tragedy of a man who carried so much, even to the very end. Betty's significance was not scandalous or sensational. It was profoundly human. She embodied the quiet, emotional anchor in a life otherwise defined by struggle and spectacle. While the world speculated and debated, Bolo understood that her importance lay not in gossip, but in the truth she quietly held, that Bruce Lee, for all his brilliance and strength, was still a man who needed someone to simply be there. And in that, she became inseparable from his final moments, forever linked to the man who seemed untouchable, yet behind closed doors bore the heaviest burdens of all. So how did Betty Ting Pay silently bear the weight of Bruce Lee's final moments, and what truths did she witness that the world never saw? Keep watching. The silent weight of witness. According to Bolo Yeung, there was a side of Bruce Lee's story the world rarely acknowledged, the quiet heartbreak left behind for those who loved him in ways the cameras could never capture. And no one embodied that heartbreak more than Betty Ting Pay. After Bruce's death on July 20th, 1973, the world fixated on her, thrusting her into a spotlight she had never asked for. The accomplished Hong Kong actress, respected for her talent and ambition, suddenly found her life rewritten by tragedy. To the public, she was no longer just Betty Ting Pay. She was the woman who had been there in Bruce's final moments. A title heavy with assumptions, scrutiny, and unrelenting curiosity. Bolo had watched from the sidelines, aware of the emotional toll the world's gaze had begun to exact. Betty's connection to Bruce was intimate but not sensational. She had offered him refuge in the storm of his fame, a quiet space where he could rest, breathe, and briefly be human. He came to her apartment, exhausted from the pressures of film projects, relentless training, and the weight of expectation. She gave him a painkiller for the headaches that plagued him, hoping to ease his discomfort. He lay down, intending only to rest for a while, and never woke. To Betty, it was a simple, tragic moment. A man she cared about, taken by circumstances beyond her control. Yet the world refused to see it simply. The media seized on her presence with a ferocity that left her little room to grieve privately. Headlines painted her as everything from a mourning lover to a mysterious figure with hidden knowledge of Bruce's death. Rumors spread like wildfire. Questions were asked, accusations whispered. People scrutinized her every action, every statement, and even her silences. Bolo could see how the pressure pressed down on her, much like the invisible weight Bruce carried himself. In the midst of public judgment, Betty was left to bear an emotional load that few could imagine, a grief compounded by suspicion and relentless intrusion. Bolo reflected on how unfair the world could be. Bruce's brilliance had left a legacy of admiration, but also a trail of quiet suffering for those closest to him. Betty's life had changed in a single, irreversible moment. She continued her career, pursued her ambitions, but the shadow of that afternoon clung to her, inescapable. Every new role, every public appearance, carried the weight of her association with Bruce's final hours. Yet she remained steadfast, recounting the truth as she knew it. Bruce had come to rest, taken a simple painkiller, and never woken. A straightforward fact, yet the simplest truths are often the hardest for the world to accept. From Bolo's perspective, Betty's tragedy was a reflection of the human cost behind Bruce's legend. While the world focused on conspiracy theories and scandal, she carried the emotional aftermath, a burden that would shape the rest of her life. Her sorrow was quiet but profound, invisible to the millions who speculated, yet unmistakable to those who understood the man she had loved and the tragedy she had lived through. And here, Bolo realized a subtle, heartbreaking twist. The story of Bruce Lee's death was never just about him. It was also about the people left behind, the silent witnesses to genius and mortality. Betty Ting Pay was more than a footnote in history. She was the keeper of a truth that the world could never fully grasp, the human, fragile reality behind the untouchable legend. What do you think the world never knew about Bruce Lee? His hidden struggles, unseen vulnerabilities, or the private truths only Bolo and Betty truly witnessed? The human genius behind the legend. In the eyes of Bolo Yeung, Bruce Lee was more than a myth, more than the invincible fighter the world adored. While Bolo's respect and admiration for Bruce were immeasurable, he also saw a truth that many fans struggled to accept. Bruce was human. His skills were extraordinary, lightning-fast reflexes, impeccable timing. But he acknowledged his own limits. Bolo remembered sparring sessions where Bruce deliberately put himself at a disadvantage, testing not just his strength, but his adaptability. That willingness to learn through challenge, Bolo insisted, was the essence of Bruce's genius. Contrary to popular belief, Bruce's brilliance did not stem solely from traditional martial arts like Wing Chun. Bolo observed firsthand how Bruce experimented relentlessly, blending boxing, fencing, judo, and Filipino stick fighting into a fluid, dynamic system. This eclectic approach became Jeet Kune Do, a style defined not by rigid tradition, but by practicality and efficiency. Bruce would combine techniques from unrelated disciplines, often creating entirely new ways to move, strike, and defend. Yet, Bolo noted, Bruce never dismissed tradition outright. He deeply respected foundational systems like Wing Chun and Tai Chi, understanding that innovation built on mastery, not disregard. Bolo also saw the intense discipline behind Bruce's natural talent. His lightning reflexes and explosive power were honed through years of relentless training. The world imagined invincibility. Bolo knew persistence, adaptation, and strategy were what truly made Bruce formidable. Every strike, every maneuver, every tactical choice was the result of observation, experimentation, and constant self-challenge. From Bolo's vantage point, Bruce Lee's legend was not about perfection or infallibility. It was about relentless curiosity, the courage to confront weaknesses, and the genius to transform human limitation into extraordinary capability. In Bolo's eyes, the man behind the myth was not untouchable. He was profound, human, and endlessly inspiring. So, what do you think really made Bruce Lee extraordinary? His raw talent, relentless discipline, or the hidden vulnerabilities Bolo witnessed up close? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.